ICQ Podcast Episode 301, Long Island CW Club. Well, hello fellow AMTAM radio enthusiasts, and welcome to this our 301st episode of the ICQ AMTAM radio podcast. Supported this episode by Michael Rosenberg, November 9 Yankee Bravo, Constantino Dino Papas, Kilo Lima 0 Sierra, along with our monthly and annual subscription donors. In this episode, Martin M1MRB is joined by Leslie Golf 0 Charlie India Bravo, Edmund Mike 0 Mike November Golf, Matthew Mike 0 November Yankee X-Ray, Dan Kilo Bravo 6 November Uniform, Ruth Kilo Mike 4 Lima Alpha Oscar, welcome to the team Ruth, and Ed DD5 Lima Papa to discuss the latest AMSAT radio news. Myself, Colin M6BOY, rounds up the news in brief, and this episode's feature is a discussion with the Long Island CW Club in how they've been growing their club, attracting new members and keeping things vibrant in the hobby. Well, as we always say every episode, there are donors that keep this show advert free and stop you being punted with all sorts of weird and wonderful pills and mattresses and books and meat offers and God knows what else. So we'd like to thank our donors who have made reference to our 300 show in their donations. Michael Rosenberg sent us a numerical value to honour us for our 300th podcast. Thank you all for your generosity and your commitment to amateur radio community worldwide. So thank you very much, Michael. That's Michael November 9 Yankee Bravo. And Dino Kilo Lima 0 Sierra, Dino's a long-time donor to the show, sent quite a few donations over the years. He said he popped in his donation and forgot to add his note to say happy 300th on his donation. So to pass on his congratulations to the team. So thank you very much, Dino, for thinking of us. We really do appreciate it. Now, as always, guys, we'd like to point in the direction of what the guys did there, Dino and Michael, by visiting icqpodcast.com/donate, where anything you can send our way is always greatly appreciated. And as I say, more than anything else, keeps us advert free and lets us provide you with the content that I know you guys all enjoy. Now, we've been mentioning this Frank Howell, Kilo Foxtrot 4 Mike Hotel. As I say, he came up with a wonderful idea of a Homebrew Heroes Award. Martin and I are very happy to be helping him out and, in some marketing help and promotion for the award. As I say, I know things are moving along nicely with Frank. They've announced a second sponsor for a prize sponsor for the award. And I say things are moving along quite nicely. I say the selection committee are going to have a horrendous job soon actually making a decision on who's going to be the first ever recipient of this award. But in the meantime, you can check out more details about this new scheme by visiting homebrewheroes.org. Where I say you can find out about not only who the award sponsors are, but also see Frank as his interview on Ham Nation, where he was on a few weeks ago as well, talking about the award as well. So he's certainly getting out and about and doing a lot of things in terms of promoting the award. So any support you can give Frank and the Homebrew Heroes team be greatly appreciated. Well, now we join our wonderful mammoth team this episode, looking at news. We've got Leslie, Edmund, Matthew, Dan, Ruth and Ed are joining Martin this episode, and they're going to be discussing radio spectrum management traces activated on an unregistered personal locator beacon and the internet's impact on international radio. As always, guys, I hope you enjoy.
The ICQ podcast. Come for a moment. Stay for an hour.
Well, hi guys, and welcome to this episode's News Roundtable. It's the News Roundtable for episode 301. I've got a large group with me tonight, should be fun. Should be more fun than normal. Mr. Leslie Butterfield's here and as guilty as always.
Good evening, Martin. I must admit I'm struggling at the moment with gremlins, and they decided to get into this microphone and the headset and play silly so-and-sos with me. So I'm going to have to do a bit of Heath Robinson and sort of sticky back plaster the switch in position. But we will persevere.
Yeah, I'm sure you will, mate. You're a Blue Peter child, so you'll be all right. We also have Mr. Edmund Spicer M0MNG. Hi, Edmund.
Hello, Martin. Hello, everybody.
Good to have you. Back after a long exit with us, I'm Matthew Nassau M0NJX. Hi, Matt.
Hello, hello. The rumors of my death are greatly exaggerated. I am I am still here.
That's good to have you back, and we always knew you was back. Now, the big announcement of this episode. Sorry, it's not you, Ed, but let's bring Ed in first. Ed Durrant, DD5, who's going to join the other group as of the next episode, but Ed hasn't been on with us for a while, so I asked Ed to join us tonight so that we can hear from Ed. So hi, Ed.
Yeah, hi Martin, and congratulations on your 300th edition.
Yeah.
Which is this week, not last week.
Well, it's 300 actually recording, but I was seriously involved in
your 300th edition.
Yeah. But, so there you go. And the extra piece of news, I'm pleased to welcome on board Miss Ruth Willet, KM4LAO. Hi, Ruth.
Good evening. It is great to be on for the first time. Hello to everybody.
Yeah, it's good to have you. And as I say, as the months go on, I'm sure people are going to get to know and love you as much as they like the rest of the boys. So great to have you on board.
Let's hope they like her more.
Well, Dan, I still like you. You're all right. but no. I shall behave myself, Dan. Sorry. I still need to apologise to your good lady for using a naughty word when I spoke to you on Skype the other day. Okay, enough of that fun. Let's move on. The radio spectrum management traced activity of an unregistered personal locator beacon in New Zealand. A little bit of a worrying one because this is not the first time this has happened. And I know it happened once in the UK because I remember a guy telling me that he actually set one off on the workbench, went off out to do a service call, and they actually launched a helicopter and everything. So, yeah, a bit of a worrier. What do you think, Dan?
Well, that's kind of cool. I would be interested to know why this guy was unregistered, for one thing. But does this story say anything about the guy was saved from a bad situation or anything? Or does it just say they found it?
It just says they found it, and they found it. But interestingly, they wouldn't go into the place. They actually called the police. So I think it was a little bit worrying, Dan.
Yeah, well, that makes sense, right? They don't have the authority to do that. So
true. Edmund, what's your thoughts on this one?
Well, just to show, doesn't it? Even if you think you are making a transmission that nobody else is going to hear, and maybe if you're using low power, you can't get away with sticking RF into the ionosphere and and thinking that nobody's going to hear it. But I'm a little bit intrigued. There's an air of mystery about this, isn't it? That they got within 100 meters or so, did a bit of direction finding and got very close, but then had to call the police in because they couldn't go into the actual location, which has kind of set off my overactive imagination, Martin. So, yeah, I don't know what to make of it, really.
No, but it's interesting. Ruth, have you ever come across any of this? I know it's not amateur stuff, but have you ever come across stories of these beacons going off, causing problems?
Yeah, I've definitely heard the stories, and I think it's very fascinating how they come about. Like others have said, I hope that whoever had the beacon on is okay, but it definitely it shows it's important to, be careful, where you're transmitting. You aren't operating somewhere you don't have the license for. But it's definitely very interesting how it ties in with the radio, and I like reading the stories, and like others have said, it's the air of mystery that we don't know in the story is very fascinating. I'm curious if we'll ever learn the rest of the story behind it.
Yeah, the problem is I don't know that we ever will, but it's interesting, and when these sort of things go off. Matthew, any thoughts on this one?
Well, it's great to see technology working. I guess these personal locator beacons, they're not toys, right? They should be registered per person. They're there for emergencies only. They clearly kick off a search, an effort to find you. I guess my only question reading the story was the Rescue Coordination Center in New Zealand called for help called the radio spectrum management team to help with the location. I would have thought there would have been a more formal, or I don't know, would the RSM be the natural group that you would go to find the direction finding for the beacon, or would they have actually gone to other services and they couldn't use them, like they couldn't use the air search teams and the police teams, or I mentioned satellites couldn't track it correctly. So maybe there was, second line of defense, which was the radio spectrum management group that had the experience of direction finding to help out. There's some questions to ask around the story, but it's great to know that it was found and hopefully was resolved, whatever the issue was.
Yeah, I think the batteries were fairly low, so it could be heard on some frequencies and not on others, which was creating them a bit of problems actually trying to track it down. Ed, your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, technology is interesting because it actually transmits on two frequencies. It wasn't just that it's just picking one. The 400 megahertz frequency is the longer distance, and when they get close to it, they then switch to 100 megahertz to do a proper DF on it. They don't say where it was that they weren't allowed to go. They were not allowed to go into. The inference is that it was a rough area or something, but of course it could also have been military. It could have been a military establishment who had accidentally kicked one of these off. We probably will never know if it was military. We certainly won't know because they'll never admit it. But yeah, the registration site as well is open to the public and everybody for New Zealand for these. And it's free to register. And they just say to everybody, please, when you do buy yourself one of these beacons, because you're going to go out in your yacht or whatever, please make sure, or you're going to climb a mountain or whatever you're taking it for, please make sure you do register all your details. It could save them hours in getting in touch with the right people to make sure that it isn't a false alarm, and then also get the emergency services to you that bit quicker if you register. So I would have thought it was very obvious to register, but I guess it depends who's using it.
Well, let's say it's one of those interesting things. Leslie, do you like to have the final word on this one?
Like you said, it doesn't really give all the full story, but that doesn't matter. The thing is, it's sorted. These things happen. Officer in blue knocks on your door and says, "Good morning, sir." Oh dear, how can I help you? Now, I can just imagine the scene. But the thing is, it's sorted now, and that's the important thing.
Certainly is, and maybe one of our New Zealand listeners, if you find out more about it, just drop us a line and let us know a little bit of the background history. We'd be interested to know. Moving on, the internet impact on international radio. Well, many shortwave stations are shutting down after the Cold War. I mean, let's face it, they were propaganda stations predominantly from all sides. I'm not taking anybody's side here, but yeah, we're losing so many shortwave stations through the internet. Do you think they'll ever come back, Matt?
Will they come back? No. I think technology pushes forward and pushes radio or anything else media into other formats, and people consume it that way. I think the expectation, the long-term strategic view of a lot of these global stations was, the world is evolving. A lot of these decisions were taken, 20 years ago when they started to move onto the internet. And I have to say, I'm kind of reminded of the dot-com bubble of around the year 2000, where people had such expectations of the internet sort of changing reality and changing the world. And to some extent it has, for better or worse. But the expectations that we would be consuming everything digitally, has it happened? It's happened in visual media like the Netflixes of the world and Amazon Primes, all these kind of online services. But people haven't really transitioned to radio online, as far as I know. I don't have any metrics to hand, but the take-up of radio as an internet product is relatively low. But look at the opportunity cost of running things, doing the same thing, and having the same kind of global access through a medium which doesn't cost however millions to run the global radio services and the technology to support it. Those industries wane and new ones are supported. So I'm not a big fan of it. I was a shortwave listener back in my teens, and I loved the QSL cards and just playing with the dial and seeing what was out there. And it's unfortunately for the vast majority who are not dedicated, interested in radio, but for radio's sake, but more just for the news services and the music and the cultural influences, they will follow where those services are made available. So if it's on the internet, they'll go and use it, but we'll never go back.
Yeah, interesting. Ruth, what's your thoughts on the fact that we're losing all these shortwave stations to the internet?
I think it's a very, very interesting, certainly understandable as the times and technology have progressed. But personally, it does worry me too, because there's so many countries or parts of countries that don't have internet, or governments can block websites. So the fact that someone can keep other people from listening to the news per se on the internet is worrisome. And it's just, for me, I mean, I obviously have the ham radio background, so I like being able to communicate without use of any other technology, really. But I think it's important that somehow we be able to still do these broadcasts over something that's not just the internet, that if something happens, a catastrophe, that we can still communicate. But I do understand why the cost reduction has led broadcasters to go to the internet. So I think it's a double-edged sword. It's both good and bad. And right now it's going okay, but if something happens, I hope there's a way to get news out there.
There was always the frightening thing of when something shuts down, will we ever be able to recreate it? Ed, what's your thoughts on this one?
Well, I guess the big one, and we've got an example of it actually now as we speak, politics. Look at Kashmir. They've closed down all the internet, all the telephones. You can't get anything in or out of Kashmir by normal means. Radio is the only option. You also look around the world at the stations that have closed down and the ones that are actually still there. A lot of them are the propaganda stations from the Cold War, both the US ones and the Russian ones and the Austrian and German ones. They are all still there. They are still physically there with the antennas. The transmitters are still warmed up every week. Some of them are actually used for other services now. The commercial shortwave broadcasters from the Far East are actually expanding. So you get a lot more China radio coming into Europe now. So, I mean, yes, certain stations are closing down, but certain others are not. If we're talking broadcast radio on medium wave and slowly on FM, that's something else. But shortwave radio into most of Africa is also the best way to get news into there. And as I said, in political situations, and unfortunately we seem to have a few hotspots for that at the moment around the world, and it's getting worse, not better. I think radio is probably in those situations, propaganda, if you like, is probably going to come back in the next few years.
Well, as I say, it's an interesting time. Leslie, you were in the military. What do you think?
Oh, that was a long time ago, Martin.
Go on, you'll tell me that you rode round on horses with swords.
It was a long time ago. What can I say on this? Well, I can only sort of speak about the UK, and here, if it's a commercial organisation, yeah, you're right. You've got the overheads and costs even before you start, and commercial organisations want a return on their money, and it's quite natural, and that's how they operate. And the government, well, they're cutting back on. All governments here have been cutting back on what they support in terms of. So over here, I'm not surprised it's declining, but technology is marching on. Can it still be used? Yes, I think it still has a place, but it's going to be very, very niche. That's my take on it, but where it goes, who knows?
Yeah, I don't think we do, mate. That's the problem. Dan, have you any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see how the internet has expanded or contracted the audience for a particular broadcaster, say the BBC or the VOA, because in a way it is a bit short-sighted. I mean, I don't think you can underestimate the what the international broadcasters did during the Cold War, to do rectify that situation. And now, I mean, just like Ruth said, these things can be censored, and without being able to get your point of view to people that you want to influence, I think it could be bad. I mean, we even say that in our rules here that part of amateur radio is to enhance international goodwill. And, you say it's propaganda, but I say it's to enhance international goodwill, the shortwave broadcasting. So I think that would maybe have been a little short-sighted to get rid of everything.
I do actually agree. Getting rid of everything is wrong, Dan, but I'm not the one paying the electricity bill or the real estate bill. So I think that's it. Edmund, do you got the final thoughts on this one?
Okay, well, speaking purely with my amateur radio hat on, the decline in shortwave broadcasting could actually be something that goes in our favour. The reason that I say that is I started listening in the early 1990s when I had just become a teenager, and the shortwave broadcast bands were very crowded, and often you would get QRM from adjacent stations, because remember, on the shortwave broadcast it's 5 kilohertz steps rather than 9 kilohertz on medium wave in Europe and 10 kilohertz in America. And often stations would broadcast outside of the official frequency bands. And the one that I remember particularly was Radio Tirana from Albania, would actually broadcast on about 3 different frequencies within the 40-meter amateur band. And in those days, the 40-meter band was only 100 kilohertz wide. It hadn't yet doubled in size. So there were all kinds of problems trying to listen to radio amateurs on 40 meters, even if there weren't broadcast stations actually popping up in that band. The presence of nearby mega-strong signals in the 41-meter broadcast band would often make 40 meters or chunks of it unlistenable. Because shortwave broadcasters now declined, that problem has disappeared to a large extent. And also, taking 40 meters again, that doubled in size overnight in Europe by an extra 100 kilohertz in about 2007. And the reason that was possible was that the bottom 100 kilohertz of the 41 meter broadcast band was cleared out and then signed over as an amateur allocation. Now, if we'd still had the number of broadcast stations around that I was hearing in the early 1990s, would we have got that extra allocation? I very much doubt it. So that's a concrete example. Elsewhere in the spectrum, it's not impossible that current amateur radio allocations could grow in size. For example, if the 31 meter broadcast band lost 100 kilohertz at the top, that could double in size the 30 meter amateur allocation. And there are other examples further up the spectrum as well. So from that point of view, for radio amateurs, I think it's possibly good news. But taking my amateur radio hat off, as other people have alluded to already, it does slightly worry me that we put everything on the internet and then don't have a plan B, or close down the plan B that we did have previously. The internet is great all the time that it works, and there are so many ways in which it can not work. And I'll give you a trivial example. I live in a semi-rural area. I'm not in a town centre, but I'm certainly not in the equivalent of the Australian outback, where I am here down on the south coast of England. If I want to listen to a radio station on the internet, I get 1 bar of phone signal by 3G or 4G. So if I'm lucky, I might be able to get some audio that way on a good day. So forget that idea. I'll listen through my broadband connection at home. My broadband connection is really, really, really reliable and has never gone wrong in the last 3 years, or however long I've been with the current provider. In July, it was down for probably the best part of a week altogether. It was intermittent, but if you added it all up, I was probably without broadband for a week out of the month of July. Not because anybody was trying to censor me or restrict my listening, not because I hadn't paid the bill, purely because somebody somewhere, completely by accident, had disconnected something that they shouldn't have done at the local cabinet. So that took out my ability to listen that way. Okay, so I want to listen to the World Service, for example. No problem. I plug in my mains-operated, very power-hungry DAB digital radio, start listening, and then suddenly the power goes off, as it did in quite a few places in the UK last week when 2 power stations almost simultaneously but coincidentally disconnected from the national grid. So power goes. What do? I pick up my little battery-operated transistor radio, go on to the, I think it was the 12 megs broadcast band, and listen to the World Service coming in from Ascension Island or somewhere like that, down alongside Africa. And it worked. And as Ed mentioned, you can have political turmoil, you can have people disconnecting the internet, you can have strong winds that disrupt power supplies, climate change, political unrest, civil wars, all the rest of it. And the minute you think, well, that would never happen here, would it? Is the moment that complacency sets in, and that's when you really start to get in trouble. So I'm glad, to sum it all up, I'm glad that there is less activity than there was when I started listening on shortwave broadcast. But as humans often do, we've gone from one absolute extreme to the opposite extreme. And I think we dismantle or disregard Plan B at our peril. The end.
Well, what you're saying is there's a yin and a yang. And, well, it's an interesting points you've made there, Edmund. Moving on, Australia. The WA board has put out its commitment. It's an interesting document because they're talking about what they're going to give potentially foundation license holders, or what foundation license should be able to get. I'm kind of sitting on the fence with this one, because if you give everybody every privilege on day one on a foundation license, why would they make the effort to move forward to a higher class license and progress in their enjoyment in the hobby? Ed and I kind of discussed this at the start of a few minutes ago, but Ed, your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, a bit more background on this, actually. The original survey was put out by the ACMA, which is the regulator in Australia for communications, radio communications and TV and all that kind of thing, back in June. And they said, okay, it's that time of, 3, 4, 5 years. We ask, what do you want, basically? And there have been several proposals put through to the ACMA over the last couple of years. So they built all those into their questionnaire. Now, any of our Australian listeners, Australian listeners, I get a shot if I go back of saying that. If you want to take part now, I'm very sorry. It finished about 4 days or 5 days ago. But the reason this is a news item is because the WIA, one of the representative bodies in Australia for amateur radio, have put forward basically what they have said in their suggestion to the ACMA. But this was actually open to any Australian amateur or any holder of a VK call like myself. And so they wanted it from everybody. So yes, the ACMA will look at what comes from the representative bodies, but they'll also look at what comes from the individuals. And as Martin alluded to, some of the wording of the questions sort of gave me the impression what they were basically saying is, isn't it time that amateur radio regulated itself from a government body or a government organisation point of view, as long as you group of radio amateurs don't cause interference to anybody else, don't break any laws, and don't cause any health risks to anybody, including yourselves, then we're happy. You go and sort out what you want to do in whatever way you want to do it. If you want 1 level of license or 3 levels, let us know. And, if there's enough support for it, we'll put that in place for you. So they're basically saying it's time you regulated yourselves better. Why should we have to do it for you? And that's an adult way of approaching the requirement. I think there will be a big kickback on the point that was made, which would basically say a foundation license would get all bands and 400 watts, and as would the standard and the advanced licenses. So you'd say, well, where's the difference between the licenses then? So you'd all have the same privileges. That's going to be kicked back, I'm pretty sure, because they're going to say, as we've said, unless you have some way of incenting people to go to the next level, to get more skills, to get more knowledge, to be more valuable as a radio operator, people are not going to do it. It's just the way people are. So be interesting to wait and see about that. They did actually say between the lines, you're not going to get a kilowatt, which is what's been asked for several years. There was a trial 6 or even 7 years ago, which I took part in Australia, and the regulators were not happy with how that went. And I think we're going to have to wait a few more years before we see 1 kilowatt, which the neighbours in New Zealand, of course, already have. Okay, so that's my comments. Basically, I think you can look into all the details, but it was the ACMA that put the questionnaire out asking, what do you want for the next 5 years, 10 years, etc. And the news item we've got here is actually what the WIA believes what we should be asking for.
Right, no problems. It's an interesting one. Ruth, when you started out, obviously you progressed through the license, but when you started out, if somebody had given you everything on say, your technician license, would you have felt fulfilled?
I think it would have been harder to encourage anybody to upgrade if you gave them everything at the technician level. And that's the reason why I worked so hard to upgrade for me from technician to general and amateur extra, because I wanted the access to all of the bands and all of the modes and higher power. I think it's an important discussion because you want people to be active, but yeah, you can't give them everything at the technician level. I mean, if I'd had much more, it probably would have taken me longer to upgrade. Given my personality, I would have upgraded at some point all the way, but not having access to all bands and all modes gave me that added push to upgrade all the way up to extra within a year. So I think it's definitely an important consideration, but you don't want to give everybody access to all bands and all modes right away because you need something to work toward.
Yeah, I agree with you totally. Dan, your thoughts on this one? I mean, you teach, be a nightmare, wouldn't it?
Well, what would be a nightmare especially if we went to like one class of licenses, I'd sell fewer books. But besides that, my question would be, at what point is this going to come to bite us? By giving people more privileges without demonstrating certain abilities, at some point we're going to have a problem where people are causing interference. And with the cutbacks, especially in the FCC, it sounds like in the ACMA, there's going to be less government to police it. And, we say, well, we're self-policing, and we are to a point, but at some point we're not, we don't have the authority. So I just wonder, at one point, is this giving away all these privileges going to come to bite us?
Yeah, I know what you mean. And the silly thing is, I don't think that the licensing authorities really care what amateurs do within their block, as Ed was saying. You take, for instance, in the UK, if I was a CBer, I would be allowed 12 watts on SSB on CB SSB. If I'm an amateur, a foundation license holder in the UK, the equivalent of a technician in the States, I would be allowed 10 watts. Now, the difference between 10 and 12 is not much, but there is a difference. So it's a bit of a strange one. Leslie, you got any thoughts on this one?
I've been listening with intent. The phrase "come back to bite." Yes, we're trying to encourage people, and that's what this hobby is all about. To make not make people. That's the wrong words, but to encourage people to progress. But if you give them everything in one go, anybody can pass the exam, and then you say, right, we'll put this station together. Unless you've sort of done the apprenticeship and just gradually worked your way up and put kit together. Oh yeah, I know how to do that at 10 watts. Well, if I increase the power, I've got to be a little bit more careful about this, that, and the other, and whether it's a halfway. But no, I can't do that because I get voltage. All those types of things come into play. And once you're given privileges, you can't take them back. So what do we do? I mean, this document reminds me very much of what Ofcom did a couple of years back when they had their 50-page change document, all the changes in the amateur radio license we had here. So I think it's a similar thing. Yes, there's individuals asking for things and their national society, and all these ideas will go into a pot and something will come out the other end. And, let's see what the process brings about. So that's the important thing to me.
Yeah. Well, Matt, your thoughts on this one?
Well, limited content to add. I guess as an external observer to the Australian story, the whether, as Ed points out, it's an opportunity for, I think he used the word adult conversation around self-governance and ownership, and let the Spectrum Authority do its thing about spectrum management. That's one conversation. And then when you kind of open the door and say, hey guys, what do you guys want in amateur radio in the next 5 or 10 years? Everyone's going to put their hand up and say, I want more. I want more space. I want more privileges. I want more access. That will be managed, whether it's by the spectrum management or the WIA. And they will look at the factors that, things like giving foundations small access, advanced users large access to features and functions of our hobby. And for all the good reasons, right? Making sure that people who learn responsibility and learn experience get to play with the bigger toys and more spectrum and more power versus novices who are just kind of learning the craft. But all that ownership and structured learning and privileges and entitlement is a sort of background noise to what is perhaps more disconcerting is the chance to lose spectrum, which is one of the comments in the article around the 3.6 gigahertz band. Any ground that we lose in spectrum access, whether or not it's the 2 meter band or the up in the gigahertz or something else, or we gain 100 kilohertz in the 40 meter band, as Edmund mentioned in the last story. That's really where the big game is being played out, and I think that's what we need to focus on in any of our stories globally around amateur radio access to the spectrum. Who owns it? It should be us because we have it. Let's make sure we don't lose it, because the things like 5G are creeping in. Commercial interests are always there. We talked about the internet growing and people moving services and things, even radio. It's kind of an ironic thing. We're moving radio into the internet, and to get access to the internet, you need radio spectrum like 5G. So I don't know. That's my only sort of tangential comment here.
Yeah, interesting. Edmund, final words on this one?
I agree that you won't give an incentive to people to upgrade if you give them almost all the privileges that go with the full license at the foundation level. The only thing I was wondering about, though, was the not being allowed to use digital modes. I don't really see how a foundation license holder using a handheld to transmit 5 watts of DMR shouldn't be okay in terms of operating procedure, safety, that kind of thing, whereas 5 watts of FM would be okay. And in fact, without mentioning any names or call signs, some of the most knowledgeable people I know down here on the south coast, in terms of DMR particularly, are foundation license holders.
Yeah, and that's probably one of the ones that certainly is going to get approved without any issues. It's historical the way it came about, and it probably never really should have been blocked.
Incidentally, Martin, if you did want to have fun with 12 watts of SSB on the CB band. You can only do it legally on the CEPT channels, the mid 40, I think they're called. The UK 40, the FM channels are still FM only at 4 watts.
Right. Well, I wasn't intending to do it, but I was just making it forward. So interesting discussions, guys, on that one. I am moving on quickly because we've got a bit of a hard stop in a minute. Moving on, AMSAT member wins Alabama Outstanding Youth Ham Award. This young lady, Marissa, has got this nice award, and I know because she told me Ruth's worked her a few times, haven't you, Ruth?
Yes, I certainly have. I am so excited that Marissa, a W4AQT, which I love the call sign, that she got this award. Like you said, I've worked her a number of times on various satellites, and she's extremely active on the air. She's been licensed for a couple of years, and she's just so excited about the hobby, and she just loves sharing it with people. I was actually able to hear her youth forum presentation on satellites at the Dayton Hamvention and got to meet her in person shortly thereafter. So I'm happy I've been able to work her on the air a lot of times and meet her as well. I'm really impressed with everything she's done in the hobby, and I'm so happy that she was selected as the Alabama Outstanding Young Ham. So good for her.
Yeah, that's really good. And I can tell that, it sounds like you and her have both got general enthusiasm and real spark for the hobby, which is good. As I say, it's nice to see somebody improving. Edmund, go on. I'll bring you in early this time because I brought you in last a few times.
Well, I'm still to break my duck with having a contact through a satellite, although hopefully this coming weekend at the International Lighthouse and Lightship Weekend, hopefully that will change. Because of my inexperience and lack of success, I'm always well impressed with anybody who can manage to do satellite QSOs. It's certainly a very highly developed skill, so very many congratulations and well done.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Matthew, you any thoughts?
Oh, well, congratulations. That's it.
Right, say it's a good one. Leslie, we like young people doing well, don't we?
I do, and I think this is a fantastic story. I'm going to reiterate everything Ruth has said. You can just listen to the enthusiasm of this young lady doing well. And you know what? Big cheer from the ICQ podcast team, because I think it's just great. Well done.
Dan, what's your thoughts on this story?
Well, I'm with everyone else. This is a great story. My hope is that she continues throughout her rest of her teen years to continue to pursue ham radio and do great things.
Yeah, I think that's great. That's really good. Mr. Durrant, Ed, your thoughts?
Just here to what's been said by everybody else, and it's also nice to see that Bryant is the Alabama Section Youth Coordinator. I don't know if he's been that for a while, but he's also a very nice young gentleman that I've met a couple of times, interviewed a couple of times. So there's a lot of nice, positive people coming up through the hobby.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Moving on to our last news story, the first UK 288 GHz CW contact. This just blows my mind away, and I've met Chris Woodmarsh a number of times, but I'm going to ask Ruth, what's your thoughts on this one? Really up in the microwave bands.
I just love hearing stories of hams that make contacts on as many bands as they can, especially this far up in the microwave. It's just absolutely fascinating and cool, and it's really something that I'm hoping to accomplish myself over the years and try, doing as many bands as I can, especially this microwave. It's just really, really fun. And as someone who got into the hobby because I wanted to learn CW, it just makes it additionally cool, the fact that they made this historic contact using Morse code. So I think this is a great news story, and I love hearing about hams who are pushing the envelope and doing as much as they can in the hobby.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Edmund, what's your thoughts on 288 gigs?
I'm starting to feel slightly inadequate here because the highest I've ever gone is 1.2 gigahertz on the 23 SEMS band in fast scan amateur TV mode. Well, the boundaries continue to be pushed, don't they? It doesn't feel that long ago since we were talking about a 241 gigahertz contact across a car park, I seem to remember. But as it goes higher in frequency, this just becomes more and more completely bonkers, but in a good way. And this is just superb, and it's a lovely mixture of, on the one hand, a really old technology, CW, being used with cutting edge technology, pushing the boundaries on these very high frequency gigahertz bands. And why would you do it? Well, because you can, isn't it? We do these things not because they're easy, but because they're hard. And it's also quite nice to see that at the end of all the homebrew equipment connected to the parabolic dish, there is the ever faithful FT817, which is always nice to see. But this is wonderful, and very many congratulations to them. And 288 gigahertz, that just blows my mind as well. Martin, back to you.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I just think if a grain of dust got in the way, it might interfere with the signal at that wavelengths. But Leslie, I doubt if you've played with anything in this range, have you?
No, not at all, Martin. I like playing with HF. A little bit of VHF, a little bit on UHF. With the handhelds that I'm play about with, but nothing nowhere near that high frequency. Nowhere near it. So it's way out of what I do. So what can one say?
Yeah, it's interesting. Matthew, was you at the club when Chris Whitmarsh came down and did the talk for us on the microwave?
It wasn't, and I wish I was there. So what was the talk like?
Chris always does a good talk. Chris is does a very good talk, and his building ability and the quality of his builds are phenomenal, and he brought a lot of kit down for us to look at. So it was good, Matt.
I missed it. I do like to build a few bits and pieces myself, and I just looking. I've never played with the gigahertz microwave stuff. 288 gigahertz. That's a wavelength of 1.04 millimeters. And given my experience, actually today I was playing with finishing a 40 meter CW kit. 40 meters to 1.04 millimeters is a heck of a change. Different order of magnitude of problems, I think, in terms of building gear. So well done to the guys. I'd love to know what kind of power that would have been. Would it have been a milliwatt or something, or that kind of size?
It wouldn't have been much.
Yeah. So I'm looking at the video that's on YouTube. You can go and it'll be in the show notes, I guess, and you can click on it and have a look. It's a real effort to have a QSO over any reasonable distance in this sort of frequency range. They have rifle scopes on their rigs to line things up. It's a different world, but well done to them. I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, so do I. I think Chris is a very interesting guy to talk to anytime. He also runs two of the UK beacons, GB3 VHF and GB7 VHF. I think that's their call signs, but it's the 2 meter and 70 SEMS beacons in the UK. So another thing Chris does. Dan, a little bit away from your side of the pond, but what's your thoughts on this one?
Well, my first thought was 288 gigahertz. I have enough trouble on 40 meters. But having said that, of course, these guys are using CW because that's the easiest thing to do. Can you imagine trying to actually modulate a 288 gigahertz signal? So, yeah, I'm good on them that they're using CW.
Yeah, I thought they'd use CW, but it's very, very interesting to see this sort of stuff. They're really pushing the boundaries. Ed, your thoughts on this one?
Well, one expression comes to mind is it's not the amount of power, it's the size of your dish that matters. And that's very much the case up at these frequencies. The gain of the antenna makes the difference between the contact and no contact. I was surprised to see them using CW. Believe it or not, on microwave, it is actually very common to use sideband or nowadays more digital modes. So, weak signal digital modes, and had they used weak signal digital mode, they probably would have made the two-way, not one-way contact over 1.2 kilometers, which they did earlier in the day, because this record is for a two-way contact at 288 gigahertz of 175 meters. But earlier in the day, they actually managed 1.2 kilometers. So a lot further, but only one way. So, yeah, it would have been interesting to see if they had the capabilities to have done it with one of the weak signal modes. They probably would have made that a two-way as well. Yeah, very interesting. Before we started, I think there was talk about what's in these. I think these use pin diodes, don't they, to oscillate? That's what they certainly used to use about 40 years ago. Nowadays, no doubt they're even smaller because they'll be SMD components. But fantastic. You know, it's something that as long as somebody's out there doing this kind of thing, they're pushing the boundaries. And, you know, before long, we'll be fighting to keep the 288 gigahertz band away from 6G cell phones.
Oh, you happy person, Ed. You happy person at the end of the day.
Plenty of bandwidth up there.
Oh, I know. They'll be after our bandwidth, won't they? Rotten devils.
Full of optimism.
Oh, yeah. Oh, dear. But never mind. Let's hope we keep as much as we can. Right, I'm going to ask the boys what they've been up to. I shouldn't say boys, I should say ask the guys, because we're going to class Ruth as one of the guys. What they've been up to this last few weeks in amateur radio. Let's start with you, Leslie.
Well, we've recently had the Silverthorne Radio Club camp, which was a couple of weeks back. Guess who does all the lists of all the equipment? Yeah, well, that's me, I'm afraid. So, and sorted out all the gremlins, and I've just sorted out the gremlins on these headphones now. That's now sorted. They were playing up, and about halfway through this podcast, I managed to sort them out without anyone noticing. But that's what we were doing in the field: barbecue, radio, lots of antennas going up, and we had a great time. And then come back and depack. What can I say? Unpacking radio gear off a trailer. But there we go. It was a good time ahead by all. Roll on next year.
Yeah, are you doing SSB field day?
No, we've got no plans to.
All right, so won't be looking for you on the air on the first weekend in September for SSB field day. Okay, just wondered. Edmund, what have you been up to?
I don't think I've been up to anything, really, in the last few weeks. We've had quite strong winds down here on the south coast of England towards the end of July and the beginning of August, and for a fair bit of that time, half of my 40-metre dipole was actually on the floor. It blew down from the tree that it was tied up to, but apart from one evening when I went on 40 metres and there was inter-G propagation quite late into the evening, it was almost sporadic E-like, actually, despite the low frequency. Apart from that, I don't think I've really done anything at all. But this coming weekend, the third weekend in August, is my favourite amateur radio weekend of all. The International Lighthouse and Lightship weekend. So I'll be getting my tent out and glamping down at Shoreham Lighthouse in West Sussex. So please do listen out for Golf Bravo 8 Sierra Lima GB8 SL. And it's our 20th activation in a row. So hopefully we'll have a very successful weekend.
Well, I hope you do have a successful weekend, and I am trying, I can't promise you, Edmund, but I'm actually trying to come down and see you over the weekend, probably the Sunday. Matt, what are you up to? What have you been up to? Because you haven't been around for a long time, but you said you just built a new transceiver.
Yeah, I've been kicking around. I moved a couple of months ago, and to be honest, I ran into the issue of boxes. You know, stuff. My life was in boxes, and all my lab and all my bits and pieces was packed. And I think I just developed a habit of living de minimis equipment and a chair, computer, pots and pans, and that was it. So it took me a little while to kind of shake off the sort of the status quo and to open those boxes and get stuff sorted out. So I'm pleased to say in the past week or so, I've finished rebuilding my tinkering table, my desk with my electronics kit, my scopes and my power supplies and what have you. Getting that in place was so important because then I pulled out a radio kit that I had ordered about 4 months ago. It was QRP Labs QCX 5-watt CW transceiver, which is a beautiful, beautiful kit by Hans Sommer's G0UPL. And I put it together in a couple of days and got into testing it and aligning it. Hit a few snags. Things didn't quite go as planned, so broke out the scope and the probes and had a look on the troubleshooting page on the QRP Lab site and kind of problem solved it and discovered I'd left out a couple of capacitors, tiny little capacitors. The shame. I didn't hold the board up. If I held the board up, I could see the holes. It was one of those aha moments. But I did learn a lot about sort of IQ, quadrature, sampling, and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, I've got the power up, survived the smoke test, got it aligned as far as I can tell. It has a beautiful sort of side tone. So looking to get it outside next couple of weeks, I guess. Otherwise, I found I've moved into a black spot in terms of the local repeaters. So my little handy trying to check into the local repeaters, I get nothing, absolutely zero. So one of the next little tasks is to have a talk to my landlord and see if she will, shall we say, suffer the painter's pole in the backyard with a little collinear on the top to see if I can get a bit more reach on the local UHF or VHF bands. Otherwise, it's getting back into the podcast. I went down to the local Sutton and Cheam Radio Society site a couple of weekends ago, or a couple of Mondays ago, actually. We had a bit of a field play day. Should we call it a play day? Down in the local Epsom Racecourse car park. And it was good to see the guys and to remind myself the joys and pleasures of radio. So, getting back into it. Going to keep my hand on the dial. Hope to work anyone who's out there.
Yeah, well, that's good, Matt, and good to see you. And I ought to thank you for the photograph you sent me when up there, because I suddenly spotted a photograph on my phone that you took of me operating, which is very rare. That's why you made it in black and white, wasn't it?
It's always 1972 with you, isn't it?
Yeah, it always is. It always is. Hey, just quickly, you come in tomorrow night. It's club night tomorrow night, and unfortunately.
And I'll see you there. I'm also coming to the HMS Belfast activation on Saturday, coming Saturday, which will be the day before this podcast goes out.
Yeah. Well, I've had to pull my talk forward because unfortunately Bob Hyle couldn't make the talk he was going to do for us. So I'm Bob Hyle's warm-up man. Hi. Ruth, what have you been up to in the hobby in the last few weeks?
It's been a busy couple of weeks, so I'm not sure what our listeners know of my background, but so I'm currently a college student at Kettering University in Michigan, and our school is unique because I alternate my time between 3 months at semesters at school and 3-month co-op terms getting real-life work experience. So I'm currently at my co-op job in Georgia, and it's fun when I'm here because I just recently got to put back up my HF antenna so I can get back on the air on HF, do some more CW ops and a lot just general contacts of HF, which I'm looking forward to. I'm also, last couple of weeks, I've been driving around a lot between just different places. So I've been bringing all my satellite gear and making contacts wherever I go so I can stay active on the air and just keep having fun. So pretty much recently it's mostly been satellites and HF.
Yeah, well, that's really good. That's really good. And in many ways, I'd like to thank your employer for giving you a bit of time to do these. And hopefully they'll appreciate and it'll help as well.
Yes, I'm very thankful they gave me the time to do this, and I'll make the time up elsewhere, and they're very thrilled I'm on here. So I appreciate you all inviting me. It's been awesome.
No problems. Well, you look after yourself, and we'll catch up with you soon. Dan, what have you been up to?
Well, I'll go along with the lighthouse theme. 2 weeks ago, I operated from the Point O'Bark Lighthouse, which is in the thumb of Michigan. And the thumb, if you look at a map of Michigan, it looks like a little mitten, right? And the thumb is the part that looks like the thumb. Juts out into Lake Huron. And it was absolutely wonderful, just wonderful. The weather was great. I got my radio set up without too much trouble, made a bunch of contacts, and it was just a fantastic weekend. I operated from the lighthouse because here in the U.S., National Lighthouse and Lightship Weekend was a week and a half ago. I'm also going to try and operate the international weekend this coming weekend from a park called Belle Isle, which is smack in the middle of the Detroit River, and there's a lighthouse on there. So I'm going to try and activate that lighthouse this weekend. So lighthouses galore.
Yeah, sounds good to me, Dan. Sounds good to me, and sounds like you're really enjoying yourself. Well, I did see some of the posts you put on the internet of where you were operating from, and the nice sunny weather, and I thought, yeah, Dan's having a good time. So that's good.
Dan, if you decide that you're definitely going to do it, could I ask you to go onto the official website at www.illw.net and register your activation, please?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I plan to do that.
Because then you get put on the official list, and then people might listen out for you specially.
Right.
I'll be listening out for you specially. We'll probably be on 40 meters mainly, so I'm not sure I rate our chances of contacting you, but we you never know.
Yeah, you never know.
Yeah, and you'll have to do more, Edmund. Hi.
Shucks.
No, I'll listen for him on phone.
Yeah, that's great. Well, Mr. Ed, you've not been around for a long while because I know you've had trips to the UK and you've been doing something good. I don't know if you're going to tell us about your feature for the next episode, but I know it's already in the bag. But what have you been up to, Ed?
Well, since I announced it on AR Newsline, I suppose I better cover it here as well. Yeah, I got the lucky opportunity of grabbing one of the spots on one of the boats out to the Ross Revenge in Blackwater Estuary in the south of England, near off Essex. And that's actually the Radio Caroline ship. And something that coincidental, this evening, we're recording this on the 14th of August, and the 14th of August 1967 was when the UK government brought in a new law to outlaw the offshore pirate radio stations. And despite that, Radio Caroline kept operating in different forms until the 90s. But it's now a museum ship, so you can on certain weekends get out there. Certain weekends they actually, and this coming weekend is one of them, they will actually be broadcasting from the ship, but legally through a radio station on land, using a frequency allocated to them by the British government, which is an ex-BBC frequency of 648 kilohertz. And the transmitter site is Orford Ness, which is an ex-BBC transmitter site. So the pirates of all those days ago are actually using their enemies' equipment, so to speak, or not the equipment, but the sites anyway. So yeah, I got to go out there, got some nice interviews in the can. So from a couple of people, just amateurs, and that were just visiting like me, and a couple of the operators as well. So a bit of information there about what's going on the ship, and that was for the GB55RC activation on August the 3rd. I was out there. They were out there from the 2nd to the 5th, I believe. And all went very, very well. Had a lovely day for it as well, and enjoyed it. Got some good interviews in the recorder, and that's all with Colin being prepared as the feature for next week. And then I'm going to be apparently on in the other group going forward, so you'll probably hear me a bit more often, as in back to the monthly rotation, and we'll see what we've got for you next time.
Yeah, no problems, Ed. And well, it sounds like all you guys have been having a lot of fun. I've had a reasonable amount of fun myself as well. I managed to get an interview for the feature for this episode with the Long Island CW Club. Quite interesting because one of the guys was actually, I had to patch him in on a mobile phone. while he was on the interstate, so that was interesting. I've been doing a fair amount of DMR and Fusion. I've been playing with that, trying to get my head around that, and just enjoying the contacts, really, the chats. My friend Richard, 5B4AJG, if I've got your call sign wrong, Richard, I apologise, I'm doing it from memory. But Richard and I went to HMS Belfast last Friday. We had a day on Belfast, and I know he managed to work into Moscow, where we worked a gentleman you refer to as Russian Mike, and that's not a derogative statement. But everybody knows him on Cyprus as Russian Mike, so that's fine. And we also you worked a few people back in Cyprus, so they got some bits in the log. Frank sent me over a MFJ antenna switch, which is quite interesting to play with. So I've now managed to get my SDR Play to work with my Kenwood TS590. Now I've got a 590, not an SG, just an S. And with this MFJ switch and my SDR Play, I've now linked them together, and I've got a big PAN adapter, and I can control the 590 from the SDR Play and vice versa, so that's quite fun. I know lots of other people have done it, but I got around doing it as well. And last weekend I was at Flight Refueling Rally down in Dorset. Had a great time, met up with a few people, met up with the girls from Bailara's, which was nice, met up with a few other people, spoke to Steve Hartley of the Distance Learning and GQRP Club. So really had a good time out. So been pretty damn busy, I think, all of us. But at the end of the day, that's the way it is. Well, I'd like to thank each and every one of you for joining us. Unfortunately, Rufus had to dip out because of time limits. So let's thank Mr. Leslie Butterfield G0CIB.
It's been a blast, Martin. And welcome to Ruth. And thank her very, very much for coming on. It was great.
Yeah, well, you're going to see more of her, mate, so no problems. Mr. Edmund Spicer M0MNG. Sorry, putting you in Scotland there, Edmund.
Relocating me to Scotland.
Yeah, relocating you. Mr. Edmund Spicer M0MNG.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. And I echo what Leslie said. Congratulations to Ruth for her achievements in getting licensed, because I think she went from technician to extra in a very short space of time. And on the theme of young people achieving things, can I also give an honourable mention to Lauren, 2 Echo Zero Hotel Lima Romeo, and her dad Kevin, G0PEK, who for the last week have been cycling from Dover in Kent down to the furthest parts of Cornwall, and they've been doing it by bike. They've cycled hundreds of miles in about a week or so, and they're still doing it at the time of recording, and they've been transmitting APRS as they went, so I've been able to track them. And I actually thought they were going to come down my road, and so I was decoding APRS, and I suddenly realised that they were travelling on a parallel road about half a mile to the north, so I missed being able to stand at the side of the road and wave at them, but that's by the by, really. It's a fantastic achievement that they've done. One hell of an endurance type thing, so congratulations to Kevin, but to Lauren, 2E0HLR in particular. I don't know how you do it, but if you're listening to this, Lauren, well done.
I believe they were also operating 2-meter mobile.
They were. I tried calling them on 145500, but I think they were concentrating on pedalling at the time, understandably.
Pedalling and puffing and panting. They're probably a lot fitter than a lot of us put together.
I would suggest so, and yeah, Lauren's a lovely person. We've spoke to Lauren on a number of occasions, her dad. And don't forget her mum. If ever you meet Lauren and her dad, her mum is usually in the background, but she's a lovely lady and very supportive, and I say, don't forget to say hi to her. I should know her name, and I apologise, but I don't. But yeah, as I say, all in all, I think we've had a great one there. And as I say, with Ruth on board, I think he's going to be adding an extra element to the podcast. So I'd like to thank Mr. Matthew Nassau M0NJX. Thanks, Matt.
It's always a pleasure. Thanks for having me. Take care, guys.
Yeah, no problems, Matt. Mr. Dan Romanchik KB6NU. I'd like to thank you for joining us and for suggesting Ruth joined us.
Well, thank you. I'm always surprised when you ask me to appear, but I'm always grateful.
Well, you always bring something to the table, Dan, and we always enjoy talking to you, so don't be surprised. And last but not least, Mr. Ed Durrant, DD5LP. Thanks for covering off while Matthew was away, and I know you wanted to get back to the other group, so thanks for doing that for us, Ed.
Oh, no worries. I fit in wherever I'm needed.
Yeah, I know you do, but thanks anyway, mate. Okay, I'll say 73s to you all. This is not the end of the podcast, just the end of this section. 73s, guys.
Cheerio.
7-3.
73.
73.
Keep your amateur ham radio podcast advert free by donating less than a length of coax. Visit www.icqpodcast.com/donate now. For all the news, links and information, visit www.icqpodcast.com.
Now it's time to have a look at the news in brief with me, Colin M6BOY. The FT8 Digital Mode Club is celebrating its second anniversary, and it's over another week. They've got 8 special event stations active where you can potentially help to win an award. All stations will use a call sign suffix with FTDMC or FTDM. Special QSL cards will be available confirming QSLs, and logs will be uploaded to Logbook of the World and EQSL. Special event stations include A91 FTDMC in Bahrain, II8 FTDM, which is in Italy, LX8 FTDM in Luxembourg, OD5 FTDMC in Lebanon, OE19 FTDMC in Austria, TM8 FTDM in France, TO8 FTDM in Guadeloupe, I think it's pronounced, and Zulu 6 Foxtrot Tango Delta Mike Charlie in New Zealand. I can get that one right. So you can get a special anniversary award by reaching certain goals, which we'll put on the ICQ podcast website, and that event will run through to the 24th of August, so a week to go, and hope you were able to get your award. Members of the British Amateur Radio Teledata Group, BARTG, will be active using the call sign GB6080G until June 2020. They're celebrating their Diamond Jubilee, their 60th anniversary, with the special event call sign. Special awards will be available for contacts using the call sign using any any data mode. So you can get QSL cards via the Bureau, and we'll put up a link as well for more information regarding the award on their website. And a bit of news here in the UK. Ofcom has agreed to extend for a further year a notice of variation for 146-147 MHz to encourage radio amateurs to experiment and test new communication schemes and systems. The current NOVs expire on the 31st of October this year, but any full license holder may apply for an experimental NOV for this band to run through to 2020. So say you can get along to Ofcom and make that application from there. Well, now we head over to our features episode. Martin's having a chat with the guys from the Long Island CW Club about how they've increased membership and activities in their club. I'm sure there's something there for everybody to enjoy. Hope you enjoy.
And now what you've all been waiting for, this episode's feature from the ICQ podcast. Well, hi guys, and welcome to this feature. Today I have 2 gentlemen over in the States I'm talking to, which is always a pleasure. I'm talking to Howard, WB2UZE. How you doing, Howard?
I'm fine, Martin, and thank you very much for having us on the show today.
All right, and that's good. And I'm talking to Rich, who's somewhere on the road, somewhere between Chicago and Kentucky, I think. Rich's call sign is K2UPS. Hi, Rich.
How you doing, Martin? Yes, this is Rich. I am heading west right now. I'm in Ohio, heading for Chicago. I should be there in about another, about 5.5 hours or so.
All right. So you're long haul. I found the roads a bit strange when I was in the States. I came over for a date surprised at how many potholes you've got on the interstate. You must find that a real nightmare, Rich.
It can be, yes.
Still, I shouldn't bitch too much. We had a great time we were out with you guys. Howard, you mentioned that you guys have just started up a club in the last year or so, and it's grown phenomenally. So I wonder if you'd tell us about it, please.
Well, yes, Martin. We started, Rich and I, the Long Island CW Club back in January of 2018 for the purpose of training and teaching Morse code on Long Island. Back in 2017, after Field Day, Rich and I were talking that there was still tremendous pent-up demand for CW operators on Field Day because, as you know, you get 2 points for each QSO on Field Day for CW, only one on sideband, and that's really the way to go if the club wants to build up their score, but there's usually not that many CW ops around. So I came to Rich and I said, would you be interested in starting a club so that we could give back to the ham radio community locally and see if we can home grow some CW operators? And I was very pleased that Rich immediately said yes. So we started the club out in January of 2018, basically thinking we were going to be a local group of a handful of people we knew from a few clubs. But as we are today, we've grown to 172 members in 32 states and 4 countries. And we've done this by combining what's the traditional brick and mortar style club with a club that has CW classes on video conference on the internet. And it's grown a lot quicker, Martin, than we ever thought.
Yeah, that sounds really, really interesting. Well, I'm not a CW person, so I'm one of those bad people. But only because I've never got round to it. When I did my license in the UK, I was having so much fun on VHF and UHF that I never did the CW. And then when they did away with it in the UK, I also got HF privileges. When I did my license in the States and I got W9 ICQ, I suppose you'd call me a no-code extra, but hey, that's the way it is, Sir Howard.
Well, the same thing happened in the States here, but there some of us that continued with the code. I know that Rich likes CW just as much as I do. Rich, how many keys do you have?
Right now I have close to 40 different keys, a lot of straight keys, a few bugs, single and double lever paddles, and a few sideswipe or cootie keys as well. It's always been my passion when I first got a license back, I guess in about 1981, 1982. I really took to CW, and to the point now where I don't even have a microphone in my shack. If it's not CW, I don't want to do it. So
It's the same thing with me, Martin. I actually had the opportunity to buy a microphone and a speaker from my FT950 a couple of months ago from someone locally who was selling it in the club because I never had those pieces of equipment. I just had the handheld microphone that came in the box with the Yaesu. And I've had this new microphone for 3 months and I haven't even hooked it up yet. I don't even know if it works.
Right. Well, that's an interesting one then. Yeah. As I say, on the podcast, Dan Romanchik, our big CW man, Dan KB6NU, he lives over in Ann Arbor, and you probably know of him. One for Rich, and if you answer it, you can or not answer it, or refuse to answer if you want to. When I did my amateur radio license, the person teaching me used to tell me that he used to drive round with a Morse key strapped to his leg and used to do Morse mobile, CW mobile. Did you do that at all?
I do quite a bit CW mobile, not while I'm working in a company truck, but in my own personal vehicle. If you look me up on QRZ, you will see photos, both of my work truck and my Jeep, which I drive around. And I do Morse code from that using a straight key. And I have a 6-speed manual transmission, which can get quite interesting at times. I don't do that in around town traffic. I try to get out on the interstate where I'm barely going to be shifting, but I have a very small plastic straight key that I can hold in my right hand and still hold the stick shift, and so I can be keying while I'm shifting if necessary. I try not to put myself in that position, but I do Morse code while I'm driving, and it's a lot of fun. It really is. We took a trip, I guess it was last year sometime, upstate New York, several-hour drive to get up there, and Howard and a few other friend came along, and that was the first time Howard had the chance to operate CW Mobile. Now, he was not driving; he was in the passenger seat, but he really got a thrill out of that, being able to work Morse code while the scenery is changing and just going by. And it's a different type of thing. I also have quite a lot of QRN at my home QTH. So getting out in the car, driving to a local park or down to the beach, I can get away from that and enjoy it a lot better.
You know, Martin and Rich picked up when the club went to an auction in New Jersey a few months back, and hidden out of sight was a very interesting key, the one that straps to your leg. Rich, why don't you tell Martin about that?
Yeah, it was an old from the Canadian military, and it actually has two canvas straps. It's a covered straight key, but you would strap it onto your leg and it operate. I know the U.S. has, I think it's a J34, which is kind of like a metal band that would clip on. Most of the time they had J37 straight keys on them, and it would just kind of clip onto your thigh through that metal band. But this one had canvas straps on it. But when I saw that for sale, I know I had to add that to my collection.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. So that's what they did in the military when they're driving Jeeps, Martin. They would be sending while they were driving, and they had the key strapped to their leg with a leather strap. It was a pretty cool piece for us to find. I think Rich got it for $20.
Yeah, that sounds really good. Well, I know Chris Howard, another one of our presenters, M0TCH, was showing me the other day. He's just purchased off the internet a bathtub key. And the bathtub keys were used in aviation, World War II.
Yeah, the Lancaster bombers, right?
Yeah, in the Lancaster bombers, and they were sealed so that in them days, I believe your key would have quite high voltage on it and potentially spark, and therefore you had to have it enclosed so that you didn't set off any fumes that were in the plane. So, things that things us new hams don't have to worry about these days, but the old boys have been quite frightening.
Well, you know, that's interesting. You mentioned the Lancaster bombers, Rich, because Martin, on our website, LongIslandCWClub.org, we compiled a lot of interesting photographs and other videos and things that all have to do with CW, pages and pages of this. And in our historical photos gallery page, there's a picture of the inside of a Lancaster bomber with the radio operator right there with one of those very keys.
All right. Well, just goes to show I'm not so far off out of base, am I? Considering I'm not a Morse operator. But no, it's one of those subjects which I would say to people, please try Morse. I have tried Morse. Be honest with you, Morse just puts me to sleep. I lose concentration. Well, it's not strictly true. I'm a fairly busy person all the time, and the minute I stop and relax a bit, I shut down. So when I sit and listen to Morse, I relax, and then I find myself drifting off to sleep. So I suppose it beats counting sheep, guys.
Well, you know, we were talking about this the other day, and you know, people ask me quite often, like, why do I like Morse code? What does it do for me compared to other modes of amateur radio? And if ever, even going back to when I was a teenager, and I was licensed back in 1965, but if ever I had anything on my mind, Martin, that bothered me, or I was upset about something, or worried about something, or even as an adult, if I turned on the radio and started doing Morse code, it was impossible for me to remember what was bothering me because I had to concentrate on something else. And I always found it to be very relaxing. So that Morse code never really put me to sleep. It relaxed me in a very good way. And sometimes when I have other things to do, let's say even if I have to balance my checkbook or do some kind of office paperwork, I'll just turn on CW in the background and listen to a pileup, and it's just very comforting to me.
Yeah, that's good, and what works for you is obviously the good thing. But as I say, it's very interesting. Rich, you said you got over 40 keys. As I say, when I was at Dayton, I remember walking around a flea market with Dan Romanchik, and I'm going to grass him up a little bit because he did buy another an Ellicraft bug, not the bug, an Ellicraft paddle, which he was quite pleased about. He says it's not as good as his Bengali, but pretty damn good. So I don't know which is your favourite key or paddle there.
That's a good question, and I actually use almost all of my keys get rotated in and out of from the operating table. I have several splitters in line, and each one will handle up to 5 inputs. So I can hook, say, up to 5, or if I use 2 of them, I guess 9 different straight keys and other paddles on another one, all at the radio at the same time. So all I have to do to change keys is literally move my hand slightly to grab another one. And I like to move them all around. I do like the ones that require full manual manipulation. In other words, no electronic keying. The straight keys, the cooties, and the bug. I really do enjoy using those. But I'll use paddles as well. I don't know if I really have a favorite. Usually my latest acquisition tends to be my favorite one for a while. But like I said, I do rotate them through and use all of them when I'm home. And it's they each have, obviously they each work a little bit differently, even between the paddles, depending if there's springs or magnets involved. Quite a few of the keys I have been hand-built. They're one-offs or at least handcrafted in very, very low numbers. So I don't really collect on a particular, I don't know, like a group, let's say, or a particular brand. If a key strikes my fancy for whatever reason, I'll try to get it. And that's how I've been slowly. I didn't really start out to try to collect them. It's just been happening. And the amount of keys one needs is always n+1, where n is the current number of keys you have. There's always another one that you want.
Yeah, us radio amateurs do tend to hoard. I'm guilty. I think we all are. So, as I say, but at the end of the day, it's a nice hobby, and people have said to me, does your wife mind? Well, mine doesn't anyway, because we talk about things. But I always joke and say, your wife won't mind you being in this hobby, guys, because at least they know you're not down the pub or you're not out womanising.
That's right. That's right.
It's a great one. Well, guys, I'm going to wind it up here. If you wanted to find out more about your club, which is the Long Island CW Club, Howard, how would they find you?
The best way to go, Martin, would be to visit our website, longislandcwclub.org. What we do is we have 14 classes per week, all by internet video conference. We use Zoom, so people from all over the country, all over the world, it doesn't matter. We can all see each other with equal strength and clarity. It's kind of an amazing thing. We have beginners classes during the week. We have classes where you can practice your sending. We teach head copy once a week. And I guess our signature class is the QSO class, where we get on Zoom or we get on video conference together, Martin, and we all get on the same frequency, let's say on 40 meters. We listen to the same station and we take turns working that station. And since, there's beginners of different copying level, I do the decoding to take the pressure away from the students having to listen to that and worry about that. And they practice on learning their timing and making and framing the QSO, which we call the QSO protocol. And it's very exciting. And by keeping the students engaged in getting on the air quickly, the CW learning is not abstract and they get the fruits of their labors right away. So that's what we're all about. And if people just want to see what we're all about, they go to our website, send a email to us on the contact page, and we'll respond very quickly.
Yeah, that's great, Howard. Well, listen, I'd like to thank also you, Howard, WB2UZE, and equally I'd like to thank Rich, who's joined us while he's out on the road at the moment. We had to pull you in on a mobile phone, so hopefully the audio is not going to be too bad. It's not as good as normal, but it's pretty close. So I'd like to thank Rich, K2UPS, and have a safe trip the rest of your journey, Rich. And
Thank you very much, Martin.
Yeah, and one day I might do more.
It's been our pleasure.
Yeah. So thanks very much, guys, for joining us.
The ICQ Amateur Ham Radio Podcast, serving the amateur ham radio community fortnightly since 2008.
Well, welcome back everybody there after our feature, and I really hope you enjoyed Martin's chat there with the Long Island CW Club. This shows what can happen. You say it's not just getting involved with donations and promoting the show, but you can also be part of the show if you've got something to say. So the guys wanted to join us and tell us about how they've grown their club and the activities they do. And as I say, hopefully you'll take inspiration from what the guys have done, and as they continue to use those ideas to help grow your club. So that certainly was a good chat, and I'm sure it's one you enjoyed doing.
Yes, certainly did, Colin. And I enjoy chatting to everybody in amateur radio, especially if they're passionate about it. And the guys there in Long Island are just doing something a little bit different. When a lot of clubs are closing down, their emphasis is in CW training and helping people. So, yeah, I quite like what they're doing.
Yeah, well done, guys. Well, as I say, last episode was our 300th episode, and we got a couple of donors, as we mentioned, top of the show, so just thank them again. Michael Rosenberg and Dino, Kilo Lima 0 Sierra. Thank you for your donations. Both of you commented you were supporting the 300th show, so thank you very much. As we say, your donations help keep the show advert free, so all you need to do is go to www.icqpodcast.com/donate, and I say, whatever you value the show, send it our way. Might be a one-off donation like the two guys have done this episode, or setting up a monthly subscription. Those are really important. They help us provide a base and keep us going. Just as we record this, we're about 6 weeks away from UK Hamfest. We've got a team of 5 and Mrs. B going to that show. So look out for our famous orange t-shirts if you're attending UK Hamfest, and make sure you come along and say hello. We'll have a stand at the show, which is more of a meeting point rather than a stand as such. We're usually around by the prize draw area as a starting point, but you'll certainly see us dotted out throughout the show, grabbing interviews, talking to people, and more importantly, meeting up with listeners. So feel free to say hi to us from there. I'd like to welcome Ruth, Willet, Kilo Mike 4, Lima Alpha Oscar to the News Roundtable, and Ruth along with Leslie, G0CIB, Edmund, Mike 0, Mike November Golf, Matthew, great to have you back, Matthew, Mike 0, November Juliet X-Ray, Dan, Kilo Bravo 6, November Uniform, and Ed, DD5 Lima Papa. Well, we gave you a lot of news content this episode, guys. Lots of opinion. Thank you guys for all being part of the show on the News Roundtable and helping us out there. That's much appreciated. You can get involved in the usual ways. Check out the website for the news links information. Is in the next fortnight of our show, or drop us a mail through the contact us page on the website, and certainly we'll be interested to hear what you have to say. YouTube videos are always available. Previous shows, interviews we've done at shows, etc. You can check those out at youtube.com/ICQ podcast. And we'd ask you as well to click on the subscribe button there if you could, if you haven't done so already. There will be more videos going up, I say, after UK Hamfest. So make sure, I say, you're on that subscription so you can see the videos as they happen. Right, okay, well, we mentioned Mrs. B, they're coming to UK Hamfest, so we really need to make sure we keep looking after her, because, she will be taken out on the infamous ICQ podcast UK Hamfest Night Out, Dad, so maybe I should be suggesting, rather than a cup of tea and a chocolate biscuit, that you maybe find a fruit-based alcoholic drink with apples in it to get her ready for a night out in Newark-on-Trent.
Yeah, well, we can do that, certainly do that, but it'll be tea and a biscuit tonight, obviously, for very good reasons. But before I go into that, I need to make a correction. In the news roundtable, I mentioned Chris Woodmarsh looked after 2 beacons in the UK. The actual beacons are GB3 VHF and GB3 UHF, not GB7 UHF as I said, so it's GB3 UHF. So anybody who writes in and says Martin's got it wrong, didn't listen to 73s. Hi.
Oh, there's a test, isn't it? There's a test.
That's a definite test, Colin.
There's a test.
But now I'm going off to make that nice cup of tea for Mrs. B and find that chocolate picky because she'll be in, probably in the next 5 minutes or so. So, yeah, that's good, Colin.
There you go. That's your penance for getting something wrong in the news roundtable. Right, guys, I'm going to wish you all 73s, and we'll catch you all again in a fortnight's time. Look after us all, 73s.
Yeah, 73.